Today's top stories at NBR. Government releases draft of its emissions reduction. Will the deadlock of the sale of the Taupo Motorsport Park be broken? 2 new appointees to the Ports of Auckland board. And there's more coming right up. Kia ora and welcome to NBR Today, a wrap of the day's top business stories from the authority in New Zealand business news since 1970, nbr.co.nz. It's Wednesday, October 13th. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks so much for joining us. Kiwisaver provider Booster is defending charging default members a transition cost when they automatically switch from conservative to balanced funds on December 1st, saying the Financial Markets Authority has been clear on who bears the cost. But the FMA says transition costs must be borne by the relevant members only unless the provider chooses to meet the costs themselves, with other default providers yet to decide on whether they will charge a fee. The costs relate to changes to the default Kiwisaver provider regime announced in May. The default providers are those where new Kiwisaver members are automatically enrolled if they do not choose their own fund, at the time representing about 381,000 of the total 3.1 million Kiwisaver members. The government has released a draft of its emissions reduction plan as it seeks public submissions on what its final plan should include. But it has already been dismissed by climate action group Generation Zero as too weak and a disgrace. Under the Zero Carbon Act, which was amended recently, it must present its completed emissions reduction plan to Parliament in May next year, detailing its response to the Climate Change Commission's 3 emissions budgets out to 2035, which were released earlier this year. Climate Change Minister James Shaw joined NBR political editor Brent Edwards.
It's not actually a draft plan in and of itself. It's a discussion document that looks at a number of the key components that will go into the plan. You've got to remember that there have been a number of rounds of consultation, the most recent of which, of course, was the Climate Change Commission itself, which fairly thoroughly explored, most of the issues. But there are ideas that the Commission put forward that in a policy sense, you kind of need more detail on. So we want to talk to people about those, and ideas in there that we just want to test with the public as well.
Climate Change Minister James Shaw with Brent Edwards there. A revised offer from wealthy motorsport investor Tony Quinn could be enough to break the deadlock on the sale of Taupo Motorsport Park, TPMP, after its shareholders rejected a previous deal in July. TPMP told shareholders on Friday it had entered binding conditional agreements to sell its assets and business to Quinn for $9.8 million, up from the previous offer of $7.1 million. Queensland-based Quinn already owns the track facilities at Hampton Downs, south of Auckland, and Highlands near Cromwell. One of the previous stumbling blocks to a deal was ongoing arbitration between TPMP and its 5.4% shareholder, Taupo Car Club, over a track access dispute. Fuel retail minnow Gull New Zealand would have little difficulty sourcing supplies on its own, says Australian owner Ampol, which must sell Gull to buy New Zealand's biggest player, Z Energy. ASX-listed Ampol has been emphasising the value of its procurement and supply chain to Z Energy, saying the greater scale of the combined group will reduce the cost of supplying fuel. Speaking to NBR after announcing an agreement to buy Z for $1.97 billion, Ampol Chief Executive Matt Halliday said the company had established a significant fuel trading and shipping capability in Singapore and Houston, on top of its refining infrastructure in Queensland and import terminal at Kurnell. He said if you put all this together, we would have 23.5 billion litres of flows in the region, so additional scale in terms of the competitiveness of those flows is significant. NZX-listed Vital Healthcare Property Trust went into trading halt this morning following the announcement of a $140 million capital raise to purchase an Australian healthcare asset for Australian $92.75 million. The capital raise comprises a $115 million underwritten placement and a $25 million unit purchase plan. The placement will be conducted today, Wednesday, with new units issued at a fixed price of $2.90 a unit, representing a 3.7% discount to yesterday's closing price of $3.01. It's underwritten by Forsyth Barr and Goldman Sachs New Zealand. Council-owned Ports of Auckland has appointed Jeff Plunkett and Stephen Reindler to its board, following the appointment of Chair Jan Dawson at the start of October. Reindler is a director of Z Energy and Steel and Tube, and previously a director of Port of Napier, Meridian Energy and WorkSafe NZ, among others. Jeff Plunkett is the former chief executive of Port Otago, having retired from the role in 2017. He chairs NZX-listed Bliss Technologies. Get the full details of those stories and more with all our breaking business news, columns and opinion at nbr.co.nz right now. Tomorrow at NBR, in his politics column, Brent Edwards looks at whether the government is going head-on and early on the climate emergency in the same way it claims to have for COVID-19. While Dita DeBoni profiles Bo Bucks, 30 years from a Vic Park market stall to a global business in premium kids' shoes. I'm Paul Brennan. Join me again from around lunchtime tomorrow for the morning's NBR trending stories. Then same time, same place, again from 5:30 tomorrow, right here for another NBR Today.